sure you all have had a few sessions on palliative care by now because I heard Arun saying this is the 15th session. Is everybody comfortable with English, Arun?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All
And
are
if I may ask, where are all our nurses from? Where are they? Which
uh,
part of the country?
ma'am, these nurses from different part of country, ma'am. All over
Okay.
India and someone is from abroad also.
Okay.
And most important is a silent group, ma'am. We want to motivate this group.
Okay, fine. Okay, so I always tell this in the beginning of my talk that every time I talk to a bunch of doctors or nurses or even common people, I learn a lot because I also get to learn the flavor and the culture from where all of you come from. So unless you interact, I will not get an opportunity to learn, and this has to be give and take. I would not know where to start where to actually start or stop the discussion. It will all depend on how much your understanding, your interest, and your dedication in the subject is. So I will request you, for my better learning and your better understanding, to please keep it as interactive as a session as possible. Even if you don't want to talk, please put questions in the chat box. So first of all, I want to ask one simple question. Has any of you, are they already working in palliative care? Are you all already working in palliative care? As I begin to share my slides, you can put it on the chat box and Arun will have a look at it. Um, Today, my topic is going to be the respiratory symptoms, the palliative care approach for respiratory symptoms. So, I am going to uh, basically conduct this in 4 sessions, and the sessions are going to include the need for palliative care in respiratory medicine. As you know, we are all trying to integrate palliative care into various specialities. So we have realized that palliative care actually started for patients with advanced cancer, but it is not just for patients with cancer, but it works very well, and it is very important in other branches also. So I'm glad there is some chat here. I am not working, is what Alice saying. I would also like to know if anybody else is working and what actually motivated you to join this course so that we also can improve ourselves. So thank you, Alice, for replying. I really appreciate that. The rest of you, if you are able to tell us about whether you all are working or not, please put it in the chat box. So the rest of the talk will also include me introducing you chronic breathlessness syndrome, what it is, the role of morphine in managing chronic breathlessness syndrome and refractory cough in a palliative care setting, and we'll just briefly run through other respiratory symptoms. So as you all are aware, in India there is a definite rise in the non-communicable diseases. So if you see this graph, which was actually thank you, Preeti, for that comment. So if you see this graph, you will realize that in India, yes, we do add 1 million cancer population every year. And if you see the other conditions like diabetes, like heart attack, like respiratory diseases, like tuberculosis, hepatitis, stroke, it forms a big chunk of illnesses. So in India, we have a lot of patients who are affected by these illnesses. So a large amount of Indians are affected by non-cancer or non-communicable diseases. And if you actually sit back and think, you will be very clear that diabetes, blood pressure, asthma, heart disease, stroke, etc., can only be controlled. We cannot fully cure the patient of these lifestyle diseases. So, actually, if you sit back and think of all the systems, respiratory, cardiovascular, neurology, we are only able to completely cure 1/3 of the illnesses. The other 2/3, either we manage to control or they are incurable. Therefore, it becomes very important to think of palliative care in order to support these patients and families. If any of you, after having attended so many sessions from Pallium India, will you be able to tell me the gist of the definition of palliative care? Please put it in the chat box. I will really appreciate if one or two of you put it in the chat box. So the whole purpose of showing you this slide is that in India, a lot of patients have affected with non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are not curable, they are only controllable. And these patients, if you see, they remain with high symptom burden for a prolonged period of time, and they can keep getting admitted to hospital with various complications. And that is the reason why the integration of palliative care with the specialty, whether it's neuro, cardio, kidney, respiratory, is very, very important. Second, very important fact is that the non communicable diseases like kidney disease, liver disease, COPD, asthma, these are not perceived as life limiting. So, for example, if you diagnose a patient to have COPD, which is a lung smoking related lung disease, and if you tell the patient he has lung cancer, automatically the patient thinks lung cancer will take his life. While if you diagnose a patient to have smoking related lung disease, he might not necessarily think that it is a life limiting disease. So it is not perceived as a death sentence. Plus, a patient lives very long with COPD. 10 to 15 years of his life he can live with COPD, and that can be a very difficult lifestyle um, for the patient and the caregiver. That is the reason we need to integrate palliative care in respiratory medicine. So, Josin Shiba and Shija have both written that they are working in the palliative care units. Thank you, both of you, for that response. So, coming to the next topic, one of the most common things that we need to remember that in India, we have about 32% of the world's burden of chronic respiratory diseases, which is a lot of patients. So, we have one third of the world's burden, and now with COVID, it has only become worse. Plus, we are a aging population. That means our country is going to have a lot of elderly in the next 30 years. It is going to increase by a staggering 60-year-olds are going to increase by 300%, and 80-year-olds are going to increase by 700%. So, in the next 30 years, we are going to see a lot of aged people. And the whole purpose of telling you this is as you grow older, the amount of chronic diseases also grows up, keeps increasing. Therefore, the need to integrate palliative care becomes even more important in the geriatric population. The commonest symptom in respiratory medicine is breathlessness. And please do remember that breathlessness is not just due to the lungs. Breathlessness is mainly caused by conditions in the lung, but it can also be in heart disease and also be in advanced cancer. So please do remember that the causes could be in the lung, could be airway, like smoking related, or parenchymal disease, like post COVID lung, which affects the lung parenchyma, congestive heart failure, where the heart is very weak and it's not able to pump. Those conditions with advanced cancer, where there is pleural effusion, where there is metastasis in the lung from other parts of the body, as well as neurological conditions, like, for example, something that causes muscle wasting, something that causes degeneration, can also contribute to breathlessness. Another very important slide for me to show you is that we need to remember that the way in which the entire population dies can be classified into these four trajectories. That means there can be a group of people who have good quality of life and then suddenly die, like sudden deaths, like accidents, MI, etc. Now, you must remember that only less than 10% of people have sudden deaths, which means that the rest of the 90% will go through a bed bound phase. Whether it is 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, we don't know. But that is where the integration of palliative care becomes very, very important. Graph B describes the way a person probably with cancer will die, which means that he will enjoy a good quality of life, and then it will be a slow, slippery slide down to death, where this phase will really benefit for the patient and the caregiver if the palliative care physicians and the whole team is involved. The organ failure, which is going to be the most important manner in which um, the uh, respiratory disease patients are affected. This is where typically the patient is diagnosed with the illness at the age of 60 or 65, then has a prolonged period of time with poor quality life, very high symptom burden till his death. Each of this dip is an acute exacerbation, an acute event that gets him to hospital. Because of modern medicine, he lives or he or she lives, but the quality of life is never the same. So, this patient is living a very poor quality life for a very prolonged period of time. When we see these patients in hospital during the acute event, we only make the patient physically well. What happens to the patient as a human being, whether he's able to talk, whether he's able to walk, whether he's able to take a bath, all these things is something we really don't have an idea. That is the role of palliative care as to how safe and how comfortable this patient is when he goes home. Similarly, the last graph shows us the dementia graph, where these patients can live for 10 to 12 years with decreasing cognitive function, not able to do their work, etc. So please remember the elderly, the people with dementia can fit into graph D. So imagine looking after a patient of dementia or Parkinson's for 10 to 12 years. Imagine what happens to that family. Imagine what the patient goes through. And that kind of a support is what palliative care offers. So, has anybody written the gist of palliative care definition? If please do think about it, and I will just run through the presentation because these is not what you really need to understand from this talk is that palliative care needs to be integrated with all specialities. All patients, irrespective of the duration of the illness, need support. And this support is not just medical support, it is emotional, psychological, spiritual, financial support. And that is what palliative care gives. So, if you can please put in the definition of palliative care that you all have learned, it will be of great help. So we need to assess breathlessness, and the way we assess breathlessness is different scales. This is the New York Heart Association for the cardiac issues, the Modified Medical Research Council for the respiratory issues. So these things are all available for you on the net. Basically, it divides from class 1 to class 4, where class 4 is the worst situation where the patient is bedbound and housebound with maximum symptoms and extremely poor quality of life. For respiratory, it is from 0 to 4. Therefore, there are five categories. Again, fifth being the worst category. Okay. Any problem till now? Are you all able to get what I'm trying to say? Any questions? Should I go slower? Please let me know. Are you all with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you so much. So, when we are trained, Alice has written the definition of palliative care. Excellent. Holistic care of the terminally ill patients and their families, keeping improvement of quality of life as a primary goal. Excellent. But there is a point where I would like to differ, Alice. It is not just for patients at the end of life. Like I said, those patients who have a chronic illness like COPD, like Parkinson's, like a chronic renal disease, we need to integrate palliative care much earlier. So, yes, end of life care is a part of palliative care, but we really need to work together to see to it that patients benefit from palliative care much before they are terminally ill. So, that's the point I would like to make. So, when we are talking to patients who are breathless, when we are trained in both nursing as well as doctor in medicine, we are only focused on the physical symptoms. Is the patient's breathlessness better? Is the patient's cough better? Is the patient sleeping? Is the patient eating? What we do not realize is how is the patient coping with this breathlessness. We are never trained to ask these questions. Whether the breathlessness is able to make him walk to the toilet. Does he require help to walk to the toilet? Does he require help while changing? Does he require help while bathing? These questions we never tend to ask. This is a person who actually was at one point earning, running the house. So suddenly he's become bedbound and housebound. There's a lot of depression, anxiety, frustration, fear of death. And of course, because he's so much dependent on others, he's also socially isolated. Many of our patients who are in this breathless situation are not able to meet their friends. So they die a social death even before a physical one. So this is very important for us to understand that breathlessness can cause so many things to go wrong in a patient. Sorry. And this is beautifully described in this model. So if you look at this slide, you will see that a person who is breathless is going to have increased respiratory rate. His accessory muscles of respiration is going to work. He's going to pant. Okay. Once he started to pant, his mind is the most active part and he starts feeling breathless more because of anxiety, panic, fear of death. Oh God, what is going to happen to me? So it's going to increase his breathlessness. And once a patient is already breathless, second, the patient is panicking. Now, what happens? He says, oh no, I'm not going to move at all. If I move two steps, I'm going to get even more breathless. So the patient becomes more and more bedbound and gets caught in this vicious cycle of the breathing, thinking, and functioning model. The more the patient remains on the bed, the less he uses his muscles, the more he becomes deconditioned, and therefore the more he gets breathless, even with a little bit of activity. So, palliative care actually works beautifully to break this vicious cycle. We work as a multidisciplinary team where the physicians look after the breathing, optimize the medication, counselors and psychologists look after the thinking, see what is worrying the patient, make the patient less anxious, and the physiotherapist work on the patient to improve exercise capacity. It has to be a multi-pronged effort. And in all this, it is coordinated by nurses. Nurses form the backbone of the palliative care team. It is very, very important for us to train nurses in palliative care because they spend more time with the patients. Two, they're also very empathetic and therefore they get to the level of the patients and are able to be a great link between doctors and patients and family. So please remember, when you see a patient, you must think that it is not just the condition that is causing the breathlessness, but the patient's mental state and physical state can be worsening the breathlessness. And therefore, a multi-pronged, multidisciplinary approach really makes a difference. That brings us to what is chronic breathlessness. So I was telling you, very often when we ask the patient in the OPD, we ask questions in a very closed manner. Are you breathless? Are you better? I gave you medicines last time. Are you feeling better? In order to get more response from the patient, we really need to ask our questions differently. It's in a manner like, are you coping with your breathlessness? Or what are the things you're not able to do because of your breathlessness? Or have you stopped doing certain things so that you don't get breathless? So these are the kind of questions which is going to give you more and answers, and we try to help the patient. Yes, we need to remember that there are certain conditions which are incurable and we will not be able to solve all the patient's problems. But our duty is to address it, acknowledge it, and support the patient and the family during this difficult journey. We are not gods, but yes, we can make the suffering and the journey more bearable. So, coming to therefore, when do you start palliative care? Like somebody, like Alice, I think mentioned terminally ill patients, where I said no, it has to be integrated before. And that has been researched by saying when do we start palliative care in patients who are non cancer or who have chronic illnesses. So, if you are a family, if you know the way, the manner in which to decide when to start the patient on early integrated palliative care is to sit and think whether, ask yourself this question: will I be surprised if this patient is not alive in the next 12 months? Or will I be surprised if this patient dies in the next 12 months? If the answer to this question is no, that is the time to start proactive palliative care, because we need this time to build rapport with the patient, tell the patient the true picture of his illness, tell the patient what all to expect in the next 1 year, align the family members to say that this is what is may going to happen to the patient, and therefore prepare the patient and family for inevitable end. All of us, yes, are going to die. Death is inevitable, but a bad death is avoidable, especially in a background of a chronic illness which is incurable. We really need to sit and talk about death and dying. Look at the way COVID threw a surprise googly at us. None of us were prepared to talk about death and dying. And if we were all better trained in palliative care, our doctors, our physical people would have been better to handle this crisis. We are a society which is death denying. We don't want to talk about death. And yet, each one of us is going to die. So, it's very important to start getting comfortable with discussing these sticky issues. And I think Arun or Pallium India do have this paper where there is that's gold standard framework where each chronic condition has specific criteria of when to refer these patients to palliative care. And in a patient of COPD, these are the criteria. And if the patient fits into any two of the criteria, it is time to integrate palliative care. And that could just be recurrent hospital admissions or MRC, which is grade 4 or 5, those patients with decreased lung functions, those patients who have um, com- full-time oxygen and other core morbidities, patient has to fit into any two of this criteria for them to be referred to palliative care. And what do? We ask the surprise question, we assess the patient, we see to it, and then we integrate them into planning and deciding for how to prepare for end of life and how to improve their symptoms. Because what we really need to know is these people are breathless despite being on optimum medical treatment, and this breathlessness severely affects their psychosocial, physical, spiritual, financial problems. So, if a patient remains breathless on maximum treatment and continues to be breathless, it is something that is called as chronic breathlessness syndrome. So, any questions here? Have you all understood what is chronic breathlessness syndrome? So, if a patient continues to be breathless despite being on oxygen, despite being on medications or steroids, bronchodilators, everything, that patient is defined as chronic breathlessness syndrome. And there is a lot that we can do for these patients who are chronically breathless. So, simple things like finding out whether he's anxious, whether he's scared, whether he's anything happening in, we can help him with exercise, relaxing techniques, physiotherapist, counseling, whether we can give him proper position so that he feels better. Fan blowing is before the COVID, fan blowing was practiced a lot, but post COVID it is, you can actually change it to a cold or a hot towel to a patient's face, make the patient wear loose clothes, make the patient sit next to a window. So these are the things nurses can also teach the caregivers to do if the patient is very breathless. So try to massage, try to distract the patient, position the patient, sit next to the window, cold towel, fan blowing, all these things can be done by nurses and taught to the caregivers. And pharmacologically, you can give obviously the bronchodilators, steroids, nebulizers, oxygen, all these things can be given to improve the patient's breathlessness. One word of caution to all the nurses, please don't use oxygen in all patients who are breathless without measuring the oxygen saturation. Only and only if the oxygen saturation is below 88, that patient will benefit with oxygen. So there are many causes for patients to be breathless. It is not always going to be solved by giving oxygen. Oxygen is also a drug, and oxygen can also cause side effects and detrimental effects in the lung. So please use oxygen judiciously, especially a big learning from the post COVID era. We have lost a lot of patients without getting oxygen, and we cannot waste oxygen in unnecessarily in patients who do not need it. So please remember that is very, very important, that use it only if it is below 88 percentage saturation. What do we use? The medication that we use for patients in chronic breathlessness syndrome is morphine. Again, not something that is commonly taught to us in medical school. It is a narcotic, it is used for relieving cancer pain, but in very small doses, morphine is a wonder drug that can be used to decrease the patient's sensation of breathlessness. It doesn't do anything to the lung, it doesn't do anything to the airway, it doesn't do anything. It just decreases the anxiety, decreases the work of breathing, the respiratory rate, and the patient feels less breathless. And therefore, it is also needs to be remembered that we start low, go slow, which is a mantra of palliative care. Never give the patient a large dose. We start at 2.5 milligrams SOS and then 12 hourly to see to it that patient remains comfortable. And we always prescribe laxatives because morphine causes constipation. So please remember, it does not worsen the hypoxia. It will not make the patient unconscious. It does not cause addiction because you are giving it where it is indicated. So this is how we give the morphine. Unfortunately, in India, nurses are not allowed to prescribe. So I will not go into this slide. What we must remember is that morphine has a lot of phobia. Patients have problems taking it, doctors have problems prescribing it. There is a lot of misunderstanding of how to stock and dispatch morphine. But please remember, it is not just for cancer pain, it can be used judiciously for treating breathlessness. So, morphine is a wonder drug and it can be used to treat chronic breathlessness. And what we have seen what I have seen in the 4 years of my practice is that morphine actually improves the quality of life of the patient, and these patients are actually able to go independently to the toilet or sit with the others and have food or complete one sentence on the phone. So for these patients who are so breathless, morphine really makes a difference to be able to improve their quality of life. Whatever little life is left, we are able to improve their quality of life. So please remember, the role of morphine is very, very important. And all of you will also remember that very often you must have seen in the wards that the commonest symptom just before death is terminal breathlessness. Patients are gasping, patients are, it does not matter whether it's respiratory, neurology, cardiology, anything. Terminal breathlessness should be not be experienced by any of our patients. Terminal breathlessness is distressing for both the patient and for the caregivers. Whenever a person is watching a loved one die like that, it remains in the memory. So you must treat terminal breathlessness by morphine infusions. And if the patient has a lot of anxiety, we mix it with midazolam. And if the patient is very agitated, we also add haloperidol to that infusion, which is given subcutaneously over 24 hours. So, terminal breathlessness management is aggressive symptom management at the end of life. Like I said, it's a part of palliative care. So, it's also called as palliative sedation in certain parts of the world. Please do remember, very good communication, excellent documentation needs to be in place before you start treatment with palliative sedation, because the patient will become unresponsive. If you do not communicate properly, the relatives will say that the injection killed the patient. Please remember that the whole purpose of palliative sedation is comfort, to let the patient transition to death with dignity, with respect, and not suffer his last days or last breaths. So, intent is comfort, intent is not to kill the patient. That's why the dose used is very, very small, just to keep the patient comfortable so that the patient transitions into sleep. So, I will just go through in the next 5 or 7 minutes the other respiratory symptoms so that we can have time for discussion and case presentation. The other common symptoms are, of course, secretions, very commonly seen, and very often we see nurses doing suction to patients as advised by doctors. This can be very traumatic for patients as well as for the pharynx, and it's a horrible experience when the patient is awake. The reason we do suction is because the patient is not able to swallow secretions, or there are lots of secretions, and therefore what we need to do is decrease the amount of secretions by using hyoscine or glycopyrrolate. Both these medications can be given orally or they can be given subcutaneously, and therefore we need to decrease the secretion. That is very, very important instead of going in and doing suction. Cough is another important symptom which can be very distressing when it is persistent. Yes, it is a protective reflex. It prevents the foreign bodies from coming into the lung. But when it's persistent, it can cause many complications like hernia, like rib fractures, like syncope. And even, for example, these patients can have disturbed sleep. So, very often you need to remember that persistent cough can be very distressing. And again, cough can be not just the chest, but the heart, the stomach, the ear, and also sometimes psychogenic, and because of treatment. So, there are some drugs which can cause dry cough, like ACE inhibitors, post radiation, breast cancer, or radiation of the sternum. Those things can also cause cough. So, very important. The different types of cough is important. And always, whenever you see a patient, a detailed history, find out what the cause of cough is, try and get to the correctable reasons. If there's an infection, if there's reflux, etc. And if you feel the cough is intractable, then there are other medications that you can give. For example, start with lozenges, hot water, ginger, steam, and then you can, advise the patient to take maybe certain inhalers. If the patient has psychogenic cough, then we also treat the patients with SSRIs, and very refractory coughs, we treat the patient with morphine or gabapentin. So these is all for your information. This is important for you to realize that what you all need to take home from this discussion is how symptoms can affect people's lives, and not just the patient but also the caregivers. It can become extremely a big burden for that whole family, because this is not 1 2 days, this happens year after year, and it's difficult for the patients to cope. The whole idea is to see how we can help them so that their symptoms become much more bearable. Again, pleural effusion, especially in malignancy, it can be recurrently filling, and we treat according to the prognosis of the patient. So I'm not going to go into that. Hemoptysis, we have a big role from nurses of how they can support these patients, how they can bring dark towels, how to position these patients. And yes, there are many interventions that you can do to treat hemoptysis. So with that, I will end my talk, and I will hope that there are some questions from the group, and how I can actually take this discussion further, because knowledge is something that, yes, you can get it from books and Google and internet, but interaction is something that we miss even more so during the pandemic. So Arun, before we start the case presentation, if they have some questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Does anybody have any questions, doubts, share some thoughts? Have you all understood everything? And do you know how to deal with a patient of chronic breathlessness, or has anybody seen a patient of COPD or interstitial or post COVID lung? Anybody want to share an experience? You feel you could have done a little bit better or something differently after hearing today's talk? No? Meera, I think, wants to present the case. Is it Arun?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So shall we do for that, because nobody seems to have any questions?
Ma'am, there is one question from Sister Ali.
Yes. Yeah. Can low dose atropine be given? So we don't give atropine. You can give atropine eye drops, sister. So that seems to work well. Yes, the whole logic and reasoning is the same, because it acts against antimuscarinic. It can be used, and it has been used. We use atropine eye drops. Thank you for asking the question. Has anybody seen a difficult respiratory case patient in the wards that you feel you could have treated differently? I know Meera is going to present a case, but any personal experiences or any other this thing where you can actually do something different? If not, we can proceed with case presentation.
Ma'am, if a patient has respiratory distress at the end of life, is there a maximum limit for Midazole to be given, ma'am?
So again, the whole question here, Alice, in the whole principle of palliative care is comfort. Okay, so it's different for different patients. How do you know for a particular patient what is the level? So always start low, go slow. So what we do is we give 10 milligrams morphine along with 10 milligrams midaz over 24 hours, and then we assess every hour to see if we can slowly increase the drip rate so that the patient is comfortable. End result is comfort. The end result is not to end life. You get what I'm saying? It's a very gray area.
Yes, ma'am.
But the idea is
Yeah.
comfort, and you don't know what dose is going to be that for that particular patient. So always start low, go slow, review your patients often. And if the patient is slightly uncomfortable, then you can definitely increase the dose, but always communicate, justify, document, because your intent is comfort. Your intent is not to kill the patient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we go to Meera? Arun?
Yes, ma'am. I think there are more questions. Any participants have any questions, doubt? Or otherwise, we can ask after the case presentation.
Sure.
Sister Meera?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I will share the slide this time.
Okay. Ah, Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, my dear friends. I am Meera MS, working as a nursing officer in ESI Hospital, Trivandrum. The topic of my case presentation is respiratory symptoms. Before starting the presentation, I would like to give a brief description about my hospital. Our hospital is a government hospital, but only for those patients who has employees state insurance. We don't have a cancer unit nor a palliative care unit, but we do have a small chemotherapy unit with 3 beds where only those patients who come under the insurance scheme are admitted. Those patients from a regional cancer center Trivandrum who are undergoing chemotherapy after first and second doses can come to our hospital for further sessions. But they need to inform us beforehand so that we could arrange the chemotherapy medicines. After chemotherapy, they will be discharged the same day itself. Our hospital has become a COVID hospital since last 14 months. Today, I am going to present the case about a patient who is admitted in our hospital for COVID treatment and has undergone cancer treatment. So the diagnosis is a known case of cancer breast with SARS-CoV-19. Next slide. Yeah, the presenting complaints: fever, cough, respiratory distress, and depression. Next slide. History of illness. A 50-year-old woman, her name is Sharda, was admitted in our hospital few months back with fever, cough, and respiratory distress. She had already undergone a radical mastectomy of the right breast 1.5 years back, and chemotherapy as well as radiotherapy was taken. Now, she is presented with fever, cough, and respiratory distress. Blood investigations were done. Since this is a cancer patient, CT chest was taken and found slight interstitial abnormalities in both lower lungs, indicating a possibility of viral pneumonia. The SARS-CoV-2 infection was confirmed by doing the RT-PCR method. Blood investigation result shows low WBC and lymphocytes count. Patient was diagnosed as suffering from COVID-19 and transferred to the COVID ward. Antibiotics and steroids started. Respiratory distress was managed by giving bronchodilators, oxygen administration through mask, propped up position was given, vitamin tablets were also given. After 2 days, fever became normal. After 1 week, respiratory distress was relieved. Oxygen saturation became normal, and patient was transferred to another isolation unit, that is CFLTC, which was arranged by the government after discharge from our hospital. Later, she was referred to Regional Cancer Center. On examination, patient is weak and tired, pulse 92 beats per minute, BP 130/80, 130/80, and respiratory rate at that time was 22, and after that it came down. It came up to, from 22 to 26. Temperature was high, 103 degree Fahrenheit. Cough and respiratory distress was there. Oxygen saturation was 92, and after that it dropped down. Investigations, all blood investigations, including CBC, RFT, LFT, and RBS was done. D-dimer test was done. The CT test was taken. Then the psychological aspect. Her husband is a chronic diabetic patient with diabetic neuropathy. And so he was not able to go for work. She has got 2 sons. One is working in a private sector with low salary. The younger son is studying in 12th standard. Her financial status is poor. She is always in a depressive mood. Medications. Treatment. Patient already taken, I have already mentioned that patient had taken chemotherapy and radiation. Then in our hospital, the treatment which was given is antibiotic, injection Monocerf, 2 gram IV OD into 5 days, injection Dexona, 8 milligram IV BD into 5 days, followed by 8 milligram IV OD into 3 days, injection Derifilin, 100 milligram IV 8 hourly into 5 days, followed by 100 milligram IV BD into 3 days. Then multivitamin tablets also given, oxygen administration through mask, propped up position, and also psychological support is given. Then her main concern is about the side effects of treatments. Treatment means about the cancer treatment as well as after effects of COVID-19. And also she is in a poor financial condition. So the summary is a 50-year-old female after treatment done for radical mastectomy, admitted with SARS-CoV-19 infection. COVID was treated in our hospital and he is transferred to RCC for further management. Then about the discussion points, how to improve. Madam have already mentioned all the points. I think my points and discussion points are how to improve the quality of her life, then what are the psychological support which we can give, then what all treatments to be given for a cancer patient with respiratory distress in COVID-19 situation. Even after discharge from hospital, certain patients complain that they develop some respiratory distress while doing certain routine works. That means after going to the bathroom or even after taking a bath, they complain that they have developing some respiratory distress. Is there any preventive measures or exercises which we can advise? Thank you, ma'am.
By answering the questions? How can you improve quality of life? What do you mean by quality of life? What does quality of life mean to each of you? Meera, can you start? Then the rest can put in the chat box.
Quality of life means, ma'am, already she's a cancer patient. She has undergone mastectomy. I have told you, ma'am. After she had completed her
No, Meera, I want to know what is quality of life for you.
Quality of life means her.
What is good? Because what is good for you may not be good for me. So what is quality of life for you?
Quality of life means by improving her financial status.
No, you. For you, yourself.
Yeah.
Suppose I ask you, Sister Meera, when will you say you have a good quality of life?
when I feel happy.
Okay,
When
so
I feel
mentally you
happy.
have to be happy. Yes.
Yeah.
Two.
Yeah. By feeling happy, by
One is
to be
mental state, happy.
yeah
Two.
mental state. Uh, to get relief from my disease condition.
So suppose your disease is incurable.
Incurable, I have to get some psychological supports,
Correct.
not
But
only
so,
for
so
me.
basically, maximum control of physical symptoms. You should not be suffering pain. You should not be breathing in breathlessness. You should not have
Yeah.
a oozing wound. You should not
Yeah.
have be smelly somewhere. So your
Yeah.
physical symptoms should be best controlled. Correct. You
Yeah.
cannot. So basically, yes, it's unfortunate that the illness is incurable. You
Yeah.
will need psychosocial support. That's when we say already mental evaluation. You've already said as the first.
Yeah.
Second is physical comfort, that you should be at least, even if there is an incurable cancer, you should be pain free. You should
Yeah.
be comfortable. So
Yeah.
physically, symptoms should be good.
Yeah.
Financially, you should be supported. Correct?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Emotionally, your family should be supported. And what
Yes,
is the
ma'am.
most important thing about quality of you? You should be as independent as possible. For
Okay, ma'am.
example, people who are bedridden, they are very depressed, because even if they understand everything, it becomes even more difficult for them, that they realize somebody is cleaning them, somebody is changing them. So minimum independence, to able to be able to do certain things in your life. Correct? So
Yes, ma'am.
quality of life so is different for different people,
Yes, ma'am.
cannot be the same. So it is important, therefore, to ask our patients, what do you want? How do you want to support us? Okay. What is
Okay,
it
ma'am.
that we can do to you to make you feel better? So
Yeah.
it's very important to address this. So the point is, in our training, we never ask patients, what
Yes.
do you want? What is your choice? What
Yeah.
can we do for you? It is only my experience. I think we should do this. This is going to improve. This is this. Ask patients. It's
Okay,
very
ma'am.
important to give them the respect, because tomorrow we are going to be on that bed.
Yes, ma'am.
And if we are told that this is what you should don't do this, you're going to not like it, whether you're
Yeah.
a doctor, a nurse, or a non-medico.
Yeah.
So please ask patients what they want. So
Yeah.
Sister Clarita has also written, live means happy person, comfortable, healthy. Yes, but it is different for different people. Some people might not want, for example, to be, their quality of life is, say, to be able to go hiking or to go trekking. But suppose you have a COPD, his quality of life might be just to go to the toilet with less discomfort. You understand what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
very different for different people. So ask your patients what they want. And when you talk of a human being, it is not just COPD, cirrhosis, kidney disease, heart disease. It's a person. So you have to give person-centered care. So when you talk of psychological support, every person's psychological needs are different. So if you have an 85-year-old, his need will be just that I need somebody to talk to, or I need somebody to be with me, or somebody to see to that I'm safe. But if you talk to a 15-year-old patient, his needs are different. He needs somebody to play with him, or he needs somebody to keep his mind engaged. So it's very different. So that's what I mean. We need to do person-centered care, and it has to be a shared care. Ask your patients, do what you come halfway, so patient can and relatives can also come halfway. Now when you talk of COVID-19 and cancer, it is high risk for developing complications of COVID, but management of respiratory distress doesn't change. It is the same. So you assess the patient, take proper history, evaluate, give the patient non-pharmacological and pharmacological treatment, and continue the management of the respiratory distress doesn't change because they have cancer with COVID-19. But it is important to keep the patient comfortable, and that is very, very important. That is in our hands. To keep the patient comfortable is in our hands. And yes, many patients with COVID develop post-COVID lung, post-COVID or long COVID syndrome, which can be fatigue, brain fog, unable to focus, depression, fear, also breathlessness. So this is overcome by aggressive physiotherapy, and usually in 12 weeks or 3 months the symptoms settle down and patients start feeling better. So those who have survived the acute episode, who've come out on oxygen, aggressive physiotherapy and all the other holistic measures, psychological, physical. That's why palliative care is so important in the pandemic situation. It is a humanitarian crisis, and it really is very helpful to be with the patient even after he has recovered from COVID. So does that make the question, does that answer all your discussion points, Sister Meera?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Anything else anybody would like to add? Anybody wants to add anything? Arun, over to you.
Ma'am, I think there are no more questions.
Yeah.
Lovely, ma'am. Sister Shelby, you want to add anything?
No, I don't need to. It's clear. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am.
We can
yes,
stop
sister.
sharing, Arun. Yeah.
Sister Nancy.
Yes.
Ma'am, in a hospital, in this COVID patient, they are given prone ventilation, ma'am, and they are improving with prone ventilation. Any difference between giving the patient proper position or prone ventilation, which is better, ma'am?
So we have learned, actually it's COVID. The one good thing about COVID is the medical world has come very close from across the world. So since we had our first wave after America and England, they tried the prone position, and therefore we are also trying. Now, if you see the way the lung is positioned in the chest, majority of the lung is at the back. So by proning the patient, you're allowing majority of the lung to breathe easily. So it is not something that is new. It is something that's why when we take X-ray also, we take X-ray PA view, because the posterior part of the lung, there is more lung. Anteriorly, it is covered by the heart. So by turning the patient prone, more of the lung is able to ventilate better. And that is the logic of giving prone position.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So it's different in COVID-19, it is thought to be prone position. But for an asthmatic, it is probably propped up with head high like this. For a COPD, it might be like this. So it's different. So you need to assess. For that particular patient, you need to assess depending on his pathophysiology.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We can wind up, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Otherwise,
Yeah?
we can.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you, Arun. And all of you take care and please get vaccinated and tell people to get vaccinated.
Okay, thank you, Rajamma,
Thank you.
for this session, and thank you, Sister Meera, for this excellent presentation. Okay, anyway, I'm sharing the feedback link on our chat box. Please do it now. It's a request. Okay, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Bye, ma'am.